Tower of London, built by William the Conqueror in 1078, is infamous not just as a fortress, but as the stage for some of history's most chilling executions. Over nearly 1,000 years, its walls have witnessed the rise and fall of monarchs, secret plots, and the final moments of the condemned. Join us as we uncover the dark history of the Tower of London. From beheadings to brutal tortures, discover the stories of those who met their end within these walls and the chilling legacy the tower left behind. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's get started. William the Conqueror built the White Tower to establish Norman dominance over England. Standing 90 feet tall with walls 15 feet thick, it was an imposing symbol of power, visible across the city. Bishop Gundulf's innovative design, like the removable wooden stairs for defense, showcased advanced Norman engineering. Over the centuries, the tower became much more than a fortress. It served as a royal residence, a treasury for the crown jewels, a mint producing England's currency, and even a royal menagerie filled with exotic animals. Successive kings expanded the tower. Richard the Lionheart added a moat in the 1190. Henry III introduced royal apartments and even a zoo, which housed a polar bear that amazed Londoners by fishing in the Thames. While most executions took place on Tower Hill, the tower itself became the final stage for high-profile prisoners. Noble captives and fallen queens met their end here, their deaths staged as deliberate displays of royal authority. As medieval chronicler Matthew Paris observed in 1236, each person who passed through its gates knew they entered a place where fate hung delicately in the balance. The tower's role as a place of execution began with William de Mariche in 1242. His death by drawing and quartering for piracy and murder marked the beginning of a long chapter in English judicial history, where the tower would serve as both prison and final stage for many of England's most notable figures. Among all the tower's tales, none perhaps resonates more deeply than the final days of Anne Boleyn, second queen to Henry VIII. Her story, culminating on that fateful May morning in 1536, reveals both the frailty and strength of the human spirit in the face of death. During her confinement in room 15 of the Queen's house, Anne's behavior swung between extremes, moments of despair followed by displays of remarkable poise. 4 ladies attended her during these last days, including Mrs. Mary Kingston, whose husband, Sir William, the tower's constable, kept Thomas Cromwell informed of every detail of the Queen's imprisonment. Through Kingston's careful documentation, we catch glimpses of Anne's complex character, even in her darkest hours. In one particularly poignant moment, she displayed a flash of dark humor that spoke volumes about her acceptance of her fate. "I heard say the executioner was very good, and I have a little neck," she remarked, wrapping her hands around her throat with a laugh that echoed through the stone chambers. This was Anne Boleyn at her most authentic, defiant yet vulnerable, regal even in her final hours. Her walk to the scaffold, described by witnesses as marked by a certain grace in her step, became her final act of queenship, transforming her execution from a mere death into a demonstration of dignity in the face of ultimate adversity. Even now, centuries later, her story continues to resonate through the tower's ancient stones. The Spanish ambassador Eustace Chapuis, despite his known animosity toward Anne Boleyn, couldn't help but acknowledge her remarkable composure in her final moments. Her execution stood apart in English history, marked by the presence of a specially commissioned swordsman from Calais, Jean Rambaud, whose skills commanded a fee of £23, roughly £7,000 in modern currency. The poet Thomas Wyatt, watching from his window in the bell tower, captured the day's weight in his haunting verse. "These bloody days have broken my heart." The story of Lady Jane Grey brings another layer of poignancy to the tower's history. On February 12, 1554, the 17-year-old Queen of 9 Days walked to her fate wrapped in black, carrying a small prayer book that would become her final testament. Her last message, inscribed within its velvet-bound pages, "In that you wish me to die, Father, you will meet with your time of punishment," survives today in the British Library, a whisper from the past. Sir Thomas More's imprisonment and execution paint a portrait of unwavering conviction tempered by wit. During his 14 months in the bell tower, he wrote by candlelight, using charcoal on smuggled paper, maintaining both his principles and his humor. When told his sentence had been commuted from hanging to beheading, he responded with characteristic wit, "God forbid the king should use any more such mercy unto any of my friends." Perhaps no story haunts the tower more persistently than that of the princes, Edward V and his younger brother Richard. Their last known sighting in August 1483, playing with a ball in the Tower Gardens, marks the beginning of one of history's most enduring mysteries. The discovery of children's skeletons in 1674 led Charles II to commission a marble urn from Christopher Wren, though the truth of their fate remains shrouded in centuries of speculation. The tower's execution grounds themselves tell a tale of social distinction. Tower Hill, with its imposing scaffold rising 15 feet high, could hold thousands of spectators, a public theater of justice. By contrast, Tower Green offered a more intimate setting, whereas the Spanish ambassador noted of Catherine Howard's execution, the privacy of the place made it all the more terrible, as if death itself were whispering rather than shouting. Each execution followed its own careful choreography, overseen by craftsmen like John Ripley, who crafted the oak blocks, and Thomas Vickery, the tower's surgeon. These details, from Lady Rochford's fainting spell to the precise payment of 33 shillings and 4 pence for the surgeon's attendance, paint a picture of death administered with Baroque precision, where even the final moments of life followed strict protocols of rank and ceremony. As the day ended and the executioners completed their grim duties, the tower's dark legacy didn't fade. The history of hauntings at the Tower of London traces back to 1078, when its walls first rose. After nightfall, when tourists have gone and ravens have roosted, the fortress takes on a different character, steeped in centuries of executions, torture, and political intrigue, as if the past still lingers in the shadows. The first documented supernatural encounter occurred in 1817 when guard Edmund Lenthal Swift confronted an apparition in the form of a bear in Martin Tower. He died from shock 2 days later, telling tower physician Dr. James Morrison, "It was not a trick of the light nor a fancy of the mind, but as real as the stones themselves." This incident prompted tower architect Sir Robert Smirke to conduct the first formal investigation of supernatural phenomena. His private journal, now in the British Library, recorded 17 unexplained events between 1817 and 1820. Anne Boleyn's ghost, first reported by yeoman warder John Humphreys in 1864, remains the tower's most frequently cited apparition. Humphreys documented in his diary, "The lady walked as one accustomed to command, her head held high despite its ghostly detachment from her body." The record of supernatural occurrences at the tower includes several well-documented cases. In 1933, Guard Captain Leonard Whitmore reported seeing Anne Boleyn's complete execution procession, including the French swordsman and her attendants, crossing Tower Green at 8 a.m., the exact time of her historical execution. Further incidents involving Anne's presence continued through the decades. In 1976, Major General George Younghusband documented an inexplicable temperature drop in the chapel, with official logs showing a decrease from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 35 degrees Fahrenheit, within minutes, causing frost to form on interior walls during July. The Bloody Tower, associated with the disappeared princes, has generated its own pattern of unusual occurrences. In 1953, 2 guards, Thomas Willoughby and Richard Hallwell, independently reported seeing 2 boys in embroidered nightshirts at 3 o'clock in the morning, their descriptions matching 1483 inventory records. Sister Catherine Morton's 1990 photograph of 2 shadows in the Bloody Tower window later showed electromagnetic anomalies when analyzed. Lady Jane Grey sightings cluster around February 12th, her execution date. A notable mass sighting occurred in 1957, witnessed by 23 visitors and 2 yeoman warders. In 1998, tourists recorded audio of Psalm 51 being recited in 16th century French, the same prayer historically documented as Lady Jane's final words. The White Tower maintains its own supernatural chronicle, including appearances of its architect, Gundulph of Rochester. In 2011, Mason James Harper reported detailed interactions with a Norman figure who discussed specific masonry techniques. The tower's reported paranormal activity continues into modern times. Walter Raleigh's former chamber, nicknamed Walt's Study by guards, drew scientific attention during a 2018 Royal Society meeting when physicists documented tobacco smoke and Latin calculations emanating from an empty room. Security footage captured both a pacing figure and light phenomena that Cambridge physicists noted aligned with theoretical models of spiritual energy. The Temperature Research Society's 1999 study mapped cold spots and electromagnetic variations matching execution sites. Margaret Pole's execution location showed the most dramatic readings, temperatures plunging from 20 degrees Celsius to -5 degrees Celsius within seconds, accompanied by unexplained audio phenomena consistent with historical accounts. Raleigh's final words, "Strike, man, strike," reportedly echo through the bloody tower at dawn, most recently noted by night guard Stephen Matthews in December 2023. Beyond famous hauntings, the Salt Tower, where alchemist Henry Croft was imprisoned in 1590, produces reports of sulfur smells, phantom glass sounds, and unexplained blue luminescence. The medieval palace, once housing Henry III's polar bear, generates accounts of phantom roars and mysteriously appearing claw marks during full moons. In 2020, motion sensors detected large animal movements in empty spaces, prompting historic royal palace's security investigation. In January 2024, conservation workers in the Queen's House reported experiencing a time slip during renovations. 5 workers described witnessing Catherine Howard running through the corridor, pleading for mercy as historically recorded before her 1542 execution. Their descriptions of Tudor furnishings matched historical records they hadn't previously accessed. As yeoman warder John Cain observed in his 2023 memoir, "The past isn't simply remembered here. It's still happening, layer upon layer, like pages of a book that refuse to stay turned." The sense of the past lingering in the present is perhaps most evident in the somber profession of the tower's executioners. Within the ancient stones of the Tower of London, these men practiced a unique craft, one that placed them between official duty and social outcast. Their lives were defined by skill, ritual, and the heavy burden of their grim responsibilities, where each execution was not just an act of death, but a reflection of the power and authority that the tower represented. Richard Brandon, the king's executioner in the mid-17th century, is among the most infamous. Following his father Gregory's legacy, he performed his most notable task in 1649, the execution of King Charles I. For this, he was paid £30 in the king's cloak, though the event haunted him until his death. Executioners faced curious contradictions. They received compensation but endured social isolation. Records from 1538 show an annual salary of £3, with fees for tasks like beheadings, 13 shillings and 4 pence, and hangings, 6 shillings and 8 pence. They lived apart in the tower, separate from prisoners and guards. John Ketch, infamous for botched executions, embodied their isolation. Shunned in public, he spent evenings alone at taverns. Despite his failures, he displayed his name in gold above his door, and Jack Ketch became slang for any executioner. Their work demanded precision. Execution axes weighed 7 pounds, with an 18-inch blade. For prestigious executions, swords required even greater skill. Henry VIII paid £23,000, modern equivalent, for a French swordsman to execute Anne Boleyn. Scaffolds, such as those on Tower Green, were meticulously crafted to create a controlled, solemn setting. Executioners followed personal rituals to cope. Some, like Francis Threadkill, slept with their axe beneath their pillow and prayed for strength. Others fasted or sought forgiveness from their victims. The psychological toll was immense. Thomas Derrick, a former condemned man turned executioner, wrote of nightly visions of his victims. Alexander Burwell abandoned the profession after executing Margaret Pole, seeking solace in monastic life. Their tools were treated with reverence, stored carefully between uses. Executioners claimed possessions from their victims, a practice that led condemned nobles to wear their poorest clothes to the scaffold. These men lived lives of isolation, burdened by the demands of their duty and the weight of their deeds. They remain a haunting symbol of the tower's dark history. The tower's legacy lives on in the stories of the men and women who met their end here, and the eerie presence that still lingers in its halls. From royal prisoners to common criminals, from executioners to the executed, each left their mark on this ancient fortress. As we reflect on these dark chapters of history, one question remains. If these walls could speak, What untold stories would they reveal about the thousands who passed through the tower's gates, never to return?